Luka Nation. Man, we're back. We are back. This is Cage's. This is actually Cage's and I first time talking since he's back from vacation. That's always exciting. So long as we haven't seen each other in 2 years. So I missed the big lug. We hopped on here. We did a virtual hug. But
it was weird. He turned his hand with the hug, and he was doing one of these kind of like
cupping.
It was like a weird, like it was like a cupping motion.
Well, he had to get behind you. Yeah,
that's what it is.
I have the love
back
hand.
fat. So that's what it is.
It's the love hand.
A little something to hang on to.
I know if I missed Cage, I know you guys did. So we're officially back. September. This is the best time of the year. So many sports going on. Football's right around the corner. We have the World Cup in November.
I have a question though, Sean. Is it too early for apple cider? I mean, it's not fall yet.
I took the leap today, and I'm liking it, man. I say go for it. If it's available, don't go out of your way. But if it crosses in front of you, then
that's fair.
May be meant
Very
to be.
fair. It is September. If apple cider presents itself, go right ahead.
He was waiting for September 1st, knocking on Starbucks doors. Like, do you have any pumpkin spice lattes?
All right, it's pumpkin spice everywhere. It's pumpkin spice every place. Pumpkin spice starts in like July now.
If you do it, you have to go into it with confidence. You can't go into it, kind of, should I do this? Should I not? You got to go into it with confidence. And then when you drink it, act like you've been there before, I mean,
I'm with you.
One of those things.
So what do you think? I'm in Disney World for many, many days. What do you think the longest line is there?
Oh, God.
Andrew, you want to guess? You want to take a guess? The longest line? The line I waited on the longest.
Hot dogs, for sure. Hot dog line.
No. Hot dogs. So that's a pretty long line. I mean,
Disney World or Disneyland?
Yeah, within Disney World. I'll say even within Magic Kingdom, the main park.
Line length?
Yeah, line.
Okay.
What I waited on the longest. The line I waited on the longest.
I think you were in a line. The longest line you were in was 2 hours and 26 minutes.
No way. I would never wait for a ride or anything that long. I'd pay extra, get like lightning lanes and fast track. No, but my daughter needed a coffee from Starbucks on Main Street, and the Starbucks line, believe it or not, was the longest line. Crazy, right? Yeah, about
40
They hire incompetent employees.
Oh, wow.
I have a real passion about this. As someone who ran a cafe, the workers at Starbucks have deteriorated. I don't think that they can do two things at once. But
wait a second.
Yeah, terrible employees at Starbucks.
You think Starbucks? The reason why the line's so long is because of the employees,
inefficient,
not the Karens online. Let me get 3 shots of whipped cream.
Had nothing to do with Disney World on this one.
No dairy milk.
No
dairy milk.
Corporate thing.
Terrible system, terrible hiring, terrible training.
Milk.
They have the barista doing stuff that takes up, like the cashier does stuff that takes up a lot of time. Anyway, this is a guest I wanted to have on for, almost a year now. He's someone that does things a little bit different in the hobby. I kind of think of you as like the Jack Johnson of the hobby. I know that's going to sound crazy, but tell me if I'm right. Victor, you're a musician first? Musician first?
A magician?
Well,
wow.
So when you said Jack Johnson?
Yeah.
Like the old boxer from the early 90s, the black boxer from the
No. Like the singer that lives in Hawaii.
Oh yeah, okay, I'll take that. Yeah, I love Jack Johnson music. Yeah.
Is that fair?
I appreciate that. That's cool. Yeah. Yeah, banana pancakes.
Let's get back to this magic. Did you do like mime stuff? Are you like this is like this whole?
Not so.
So I did music for many years. I still do some production. I released a bunch of albums years ago. My last album I released was 2016. So I have released 5 albums, but in fact, I got to where I was doing some touring through the US, Canada, a little bit in Mexico. I lived in Mexico for 6 years.
Is that where you met Andrew?
No, man, but we talked about it a while back when he was down there. I was closer to the border though, man. I was in Ensenada, so I was 2 hours south of San Diego. So I'd be up in the States every 10 days or so, just doing banking and, getting grocery stuff I couldn't get up there. But I appreciate the Jack Johnson comment, man. I love Jack Johnson music.
Have we ever spoken before this? Never, right?
No, just texting. Yeah.
But that was the vibe because a good musician is able to, right? Like things sink in when it's more emotion driven. Like people spew facts at us, but we forget that. That's why school never resonated, right? You're just sitting there for 9 hours, you're spewing facts, and we always say retention rates like 10, 20, 30% at most. But through music, you're able to storytell. You're able to connect with your listener in a different way. And I always thought your content was so interesting because you would storytell about a vintage card, but you do it in a way that was fun, enjoyable. In a lot of ways, it reminded me of Cage too. Cage, you do this, right?
But you don't sing it? Does he sing about this
Yeah.
one? Like, here is my Jackie Robinson. No,
I think I've
only
put
sing
Jackie
one song.
in some stuff.
I can only do one song, and no one's ever gonna get to to witness it. Maybe somebody buys enough NFTs, maybe, because I could do a mean Puff the Magic Dragon, but only naked in the shower. I mean, that's the only. That's my one song. That's it.
Oh man,
how many NFTs?
We got to.
You got to buy a bunch of NFTs.
Images. But well, Andrew, so for the few people that do follow my Instagram page, it's always interesting to see who connects to what. So some people, it's like, this is the dude that does hip hop songs connected to the hobby, and some people don't even know those exist, and they only see me as the guy that does the funny videos. Or there's some people that don't even look at that stuff, and they're just reading the stuff you put in your story, which is most times it's completely different. You're talking about the hobby or different things you've learned, or you want people to kind of know from your experience and stuff. But so I liked it. It's cool that you connected with that side. That's awesome.
He sang one to me once. It was great. He was like, I love Tops You See, but not as much as Panini.
I don't know if I produced that one, man. That may have been a different guy.
All right. He doesn't love Tops. I don't know. It's good stuff. So here's my question. How have we not evolved the Mint Collective, the new shows, to basically like having an all hobby musician opening? Like you, RPS. We do like a whole show of just hobby performers. I mean, you're a magician. You could do the mime stuff. Andrew,
It could happen. I mean, it would have to be in Atlantic City if we did that. It'd have to be there. We'd all have to go back. RPS, I haven't talked to Peter Pac-Man in a while, but man, early on when he first started doing that stuff, him and I connected, and he's a really cool dude. I like him. Man, it's fun. See, that's the thing. When 2020 hit, the world was crazy. And then we're all sitting at home. We're now kind of discovering, for me, my first Instagram sports card kind of victory investments post, if you'll go back on my page, was 2014. And then I didn't post again for like years and years. And I just kind of let it die out. And it was 2014, maybe 2015, but many, many years ago. And then we're getting back in the hobby in 2020, on the social media side of things. And that's how the whole thing. You had a lot of time at home, man, and I think that's when I did like the first rap and.
I remember the one from 2014, Andrew. It was great advice. He's like, I remember one line from it. It was like a chorus, kind of like a hook. It was like, you won't believe how good of a player LeBron is, but don't overpay for Giannis. I mean, it would just be terrible.
Andrew, look at the things I was talking about. My first couple posts, I'm still saying the same thing. Like, look at the cards.
That's gorgeous. Do you own that? Do you own one of those? Do you own a Ruth?
I owned that one, yeah. But it was a PSA 5, man, and these are all cards that, man, like I still believe in, still love, like still try to let people know about.
You were almost you're lucky. Cage says a lot of people we've had on, they don't attribute their success to luck because they were in the New England area. Of course, they're going to buy Tom Brady, right? You're in the Kansas City area. Yeah, you were early on Mahomes. Are you,
dude? You don't understand the amount of regret, man, that we feel. Like, bro, that whole first year when he didn't play,
People don't realize that.
We were all thinking as fans, like we should be loading up on his cards, but we didn't even know if his second year, if he would be able to take over Alex
Think of
Smith's
what he
job.
did. Think of what he did that second year. I mean, it's pretty crazy. Think of what he did that second
So,
year. But I
yeah,
remember
man.
the draft, Andrew. People don't realize this. I remember that draft. There were analysts saying not only is he not the best quarterback, he's the third. I mean, he's picked
Yeah.
after Trubisky, right, and Deshaun Watson, right. So people were saying that he was the third best quarterback. They're not this generational talent that everybody sees now with the MVPs and the Super Bowls and stuff. So
and here's another thing, man. Like when he, as a Chiefs fan who has followed the Chiefs my whole life, when they drafted him, I can speak for 95% of Chiefs fans, and we weren't happy about it. We really weren't. We were like, none of us knew who he was. We were like, who is this guy? And Alex Smith had been getting better and better and better, and he was getting us to the playoffs, and he could never kind of get us over the hump, but people loved Alex Smith.
yeah,
And
it's a
so
good story.
when that happened, man, we're like, what's Andy doing here? Obviously now, in hindsight, 2020.
You questioned Andy Reid.
I did, man.
Listen, he's
I'll
being
never do it
honest.
again.
We say to people, they have to be more honest, that they were lucky, they lived in the right area, they bought the right guys, they got lucky to buy him. I mean, I'm still looking for an honest, Patriots fan who was around in 2000, and when Tom Brady was selected, they were, this guy's great. Tom Brady out of Michigan, great quarterback. He's going to be the future of the franchise. Yeah, sure you did. So at least you're being honest, and that's true. I remember that draft, and I remember Mahomes. It was Texas Tech, right? I remember, people were like, I don't know about this guy. He might not be that great. Think about it now.
Yeah.
So,
the analysts didn't make a big deal out of it. So when they traded up, to get a better pick, we were just like, Andy, you got to get something else. None of us knew what he was doing. And there wasn't like the big, certain people will get drafted and you see all the cheers and everything. Everyone's like,
no, because the team was good, right? They weren't a rebuilding team that needed a QB. You probably at the time were thinking like, all right, go get us a weapon, go get us a wide receiver, go get us a running back, go get us somebody to get us over the hump and get us deeper into the playoffs, maybe a defensive back, something like that. Top 100%. Line, you were like, we're going to trade up in the first round to get a quarterback that doesn't actually move us forward in the next year.
Right.
And look what happened. I remember that.
It's a lesson that there's a great book, a great business book. It's Good is the Enemy of Great. And oftentimes teams get stuck in this messy middle of being good. And we see the difference between Alex Smith and Mahomes.
Right.
Alex is a good quarterback. But to win at the highest level, right? It depends what your goals are. To win at the highest level, you need great.
Listen,
I think
messy middle is my nickname.
That's another good one.
So I'm good.
Sean,
You're good.
13 minutes, and I haven't asked you my infamous question. Your origin story. So typically, the hobby is made up of really two segments, I think. You guys might say I'm wrong. Athletes and wannabe athletes. It's really that. But you are a musician. How did you find yourself collecting cards? When did that start?
I'm a wannabe athlete, though, man.
Nah.
Like, I feel like, so I was an athlete when I was young, and so in high school, which is what led me into the media world. I do a lot of media stuff to this day, video. I actually do a lot of film stuff. But what kind of led me into the music side of things was I got cut from my basketball team in high school, and dude, I was better than other guys on the team, and so
and then you went to UNC. You were the number 3 pick. You made the game winner, and you changed the organization forever.
But first on your way home, you hung on the monkey bars kind of deal to stretch yourself out a little bit. This way you can get a little taller.
And I could throw a football a quarter mile over them mountains.
Over them mountains.
So, I mean,
I can throw a football over the mountains. I betcha.
So man, yeah, I've loved sports, from the time I was young, but I love sports cards probably a little bit more than sports growing up. But I was doing the two in tandem, and I remember, going out and you're playing on your teams growing up, and I played baseball, I played basketball, played football for a little while. But then you would get home. So this was, this would have been late 80s, early 90s for me. And, summer nights, you get home from a baseball game and you turned on Baseball Tonight and you pulled out your Beckett and you're going through your Beckett. You're looking at all your cards on the floor, spreading them out, organizing them, reorganizing them, 1 week they're all in top loaders, the next week they're all in sleeve, they're in a binder.
A binder, yeah.
So yeah, man. So that's kind of how it all started. But I've just always loved sports, and so it's been cool to intermingle my love for music. Obviously, not most of my music is sports card related, but it's been cool to be able to blend them together, and yeah, man. So
you're sitting on some cards that. Do you think of yourself as a collector, an investor? Do you even put yourself into that bucket?
I'm not. Yeah, man. I'm a collect a flip investor.
Ooh.
Yeah. So, man, I've been in this thing too long to put a label on myself, man. Like, there's times I buy a card specifically to flip. There's times I buy a card that I'm like, I want to hold this thing long term. But the thing is, man, like, life is unpredictable. And you don't know what the future holds. You don't know what the next 6 months is, year, 5 years from now. So I'm not a big believer in like the coffin card thing. Yeah, bury me with this Barry Sanders 89 score. Like, that's just, I'm not. That's just. There's better ways to use those funds. If I'm not gonna put $100 card or $1,000 card in my coffin, I'd leave that to somebody else, man. But yeah, so
I will.
Billy
Ripken, FF era, 1989 Fleer.
That makes
Billy
sense.
Ripken, that's coming with me.
But you're gonna sign it. Fuck off.
Well, that's I posted one time. I was like, as long as the card is raw and it's worth under $50, then yeah, you can throw it in your coffin. But dude, I don't. We get too involved in like naming people. This guy's a flipper. This guy's an investor. This guy's a collector. Too many collectors are actually flippers in disguise, and too many flippers actually may be more collectors than some of the guys that say they're collectors. So
what's funny? We're joking about it. It's actually the last minute or so. I mean, it's really valid talking points, right? And I think the hobby actually moves forward when we kind of shed some of those labels, and when we understand that, what we might try to label you as today might not apply in a week, a month, or 6 months, or a year, as you go on your hobby journey, and as the world's macroeconomic picture comes into focus, and, all these other things that kind of, impact what you're doing with your collection. Andrew and I do it all the time. We sometimes do it with our content team over text, and he's like, "You don't buy cards. You just buy a card and sit on it and hold it. You're a fat cat. You're looking down at us with these expensive, expensive
gifts." By the way, we don't give enough credit to gifts. That has absolutely changed how people communicate. With one video, you could say more than any long text.
Yeah. So we have but I mean, but then there are days where I'm buying a bunch of stuff, hoping to, to flip it when something good happens, like lead up to the football season. Somebody that people aren't buying right now. Okay, well, maybe by week 6, this person gets a chance, and I'm selling it for more than what I'm paying for. Like, I still do those kind of things also.
For sure,
it doesn't make me any less of a collector. It's just a different way of, of I don't want to call it gambling. Sure. I think it all ultimately is investing. Sure.
So let's use this next maybe 12 minutes, 5, 10, whatever. I'm going to put you on the hot seat. Cage as well. Okay. So you think of yourself as Peter Schiff, the guy who thinks that the world is coming to an end all the time, or, Mad Money Kramer, whatever. Okay. Country shuts down, tons of stimulus, cards go up insane amounts, 40,000 on the Jordan to, I'm not going to use the $780,000 sale, but let's call it 500, 40,000 to 500,000 2 years. Then we see a correction, a lot of new participants in the hobby, but a correction in prices. Now, summer's over. Summer's always, there's less buying, less selling. It's just people are doing stuff. We're heading into September 2022. Our economy, meh. Inflation is here to stay. What do you think is going to happen with the hobby? What do you see as in the market? Does it even matter? Do you think about that kind of stuff?
Are you talking about, so going forward from here, what was I thinking back kind of in beginning
going forward from here? We could go back to that and we could use that. But going forward from here, because people listening, I think there's a bit of uncertainty. I think that we don't know what's going to happen. And I think someone who's been in the hobby since, the 80s and collected and seen these cycle through, we often think the things that are happening now are new. But in fact, they're not.
Yeah. Well, Cage will remember this. There were many years when sports cards were just flat. And so I remember buying, I mean, this was like 2016. I bought a 33 Gaudi Ruth, the number 53. And I mean, I don't remember what I paid for that thing, but 18 months later, it was the exact same price. I mean, there just wasn't much movement on it. So, looking forward to the future, here's the thing, like we know that the hobby is on fire as far as participation is concerned. Like everywhere I go, dude, it can be like a VFW hall in like, podunk, middle of nowhere. And if they have a card show, it's like packed. You got people coming out of nowhere going to these shows, so that the interest is there. I do think, man, that so much of whenever money is tied to an industry, whether it's stock market or it's restaurants or whatever it is, the overarching global scenarios do play a big role. And so it's hard to imagine the same factors hitting again that hit in 2020, where you had, people just. I remember in 2019, I was on a phone call. I bought a Mahomes contender card from this dude in California. And I remember being on the phone with this guy, and he's like, you realize that stock funds are stocking up on this stuff. And that was the first time I'd ever heard of that, 2019. And he's like, I'm actually involved in one, and I'm loading up on these Mahomes contenders. He had like 6 or 7 at the time and sold me one of them as a PSA 10. And I had never heard of that whole thing. But then once 2020
I still haven't
hit,
seen any stock funds. I've heard about them now a few times, but I still haven't seen any real stock funds.
And I don't even know. Yeah, I don't even know. I think they, I don't think they were actually ever on the stock market, but they were. I don't know how it worked, man. Maybe that's just the ghost. Maybe Cage knows more about that.
It's just a bunch of people who got together and said, we're gonna pull up some money. Big people who didn't know the hobby said, "I'll give you $1 million. Go ahead and buy this for me." People were doing it with Top Shot. People were doing it. Hey,
Yeah.
I'll give you this. 5 people get together and put sort of what Alt was doing, you know what I mean? Like that's kind of, I think, what they meant, not stock per se, but the same way that, like companies buy a bunch of stock and they hold them as like a holding company, the same thing people were doing here. I love what you're saying, man. In 2020 might not come, but I think if I'm able to kind of just take what you're doing and move it 2 steps forward for the folks listening, it's drawing a comparison to what we've been through in other decades, other generations. There's a lot of good stuff going for the hobby now that we didn't have in the last one of these crazy bull run cycles, where I'm talking about like that 89 to mid 90s thing where it just blew up and then died again, like disappeared, where the companies that came in were going bankrupt, right? The biggest difference, I think, is exactly what you're talking about, the market participants that are involved. But then in addition to that, what you didn't have in the 80s that you have now is this, this instantaneous news cycle and press that is as small as, Shy Wei Vlogs posting about it on his Instagram.
I want to say,
go ahead.
I want to just keep going, Cage, but I got something about Shayway Vlogs to share in a second.
All right, so we won't forget that. But anything from as small as him, and he'll tell you he's huge. I mean, he's Warren Buffett. But from as small as him to the Wall Street Journal picking up the $12.6 million, Mickey Mantle sale, and then pieces coming out about the family and how that changed the life of a garbage man who bought a card back then. And now it becomes something that people are chasing. It's actual assets. It's money. It's if you buy something for $50,000, you too can set up your grandchildren 20 years later. Those kind of stories are a huge thing that you didn't have plastered on Times Square, murals like Ken Golden is doing, and like Heritage did with their sales and their cards. And, the fact that the news cycle is just pumping out all of these success stories, all of these new headlines, these new records, I think that will help keep the participants in and maybe bring in more participants, because you're 100% right. That's the difference, because I remember going to shows in the early 90s and it was crazy, just like it is now. But I also know that I bought a bunch of cards in 94, 95, 96. And we're not just talking, Andrew, about my Drew Bledsoe collection. We're talking about like inserts of Barry Sanders and Marshall Faulk and Joe Montana, Dan Marino. Like I still have them in monster boxes, like 5,000 card cases in my basement. They literally became unsellable cards, right? They weren't
Do we give enough
numbered.
credit to technology then, Cage? Because it sounds
We
like
don't.
the only big difference is
It's huge.
instantaneous media and the instantaneous transactions, right?
Yes, yeah, and being able to connect with people, dude. We had to Cage and I, and obviously you. I don't know when you got into cards, Andrew, but you had to be a Lone Star
70s,
collector
60s,
for
really,
a long time.
You had
And
to be
so
yourself.
then-
You had to keep yourself entertained, right? By
Yeah.
moving it into binders and taking it out of screw downs. And, if you take it to a show and show it to somebody or
Yeah.
take it up the block and say, hey,
Yeah.
guys, anybody want to trade cards today? Like, what do you have?
Yeah.
Now I go live on Whatnot and I trade cards and they're in that person's mailbox in two days.
That's a huge difference. The world, even though it has grown and the hobby has grown, the world itself is significantly smaller because of tech.
Yeah. Yeah. And then with adding in grading companies, with population reports. I mean, Cage and I, we thought we were the only one with 789 Upper Deck Griffies. We thought we were the only one with 10 Bo Jackson rookies, and then we find out later
Better than that, Andrew, was how people try to sell you stuff now, like, oh wow, look at this card's great, right? First of all, you can't. There's fraud groups. There's all kinds of. You know what it was in the early 90s? It was somebody broke their arm. Ken Griffey Jr. Injured himself, but then 3 weeks later, the Beckett price guide came out that went to print before he got injured.
Yeah.
And the arrow was still up.
Right.
You didn't get the down arrow yet, right? And you're like, look, here's the Beckett.
It was
Beckett says it's up. Beckett says the Griffey Jr. cards are up, so take it. We'll trade.
So you dumped it.
Yeah, you try to dump a card.
Was this the heyday of SportsCenter or a little bit before still?
Oh yeah, SportsCenter was a big thing then, man. Yes, it was a big thing at that point. Yeah, so
I'm surprised ESPN hasn't done like a throwback series to like Linda Cohn, Stuart Scott, Van Pelt. Remember them?
Yeah,
that'd be a cool series, right?
Yeah. Well, dude, here's the guys. Prospecting has always been a thing in sports cards. It's not a new thing. We're just, now with these crazy, you've got like NT stuff and numbered things, like, and the financial side, the numbers are just way higher.
Well, they've stretched prospecting in two ways. One, the high-end type of card. You couldn't buy a $100,000 card of a guy who hadn't played. But then more importantly, back in the 80s, even early mid-90s, when Bowman came out in 89, remember, it was in the 40s and 50s, and then lost the bubblegum war to Topps. And then now Bowman is owned by Topps. But in 89, it was just another major league product. The big thing about prospecting now with the Bowman products is you're buying cards of kids who may never get to the show.
Right.
You're buying
They're like
cards
16
of kids
years old.
who are 12. You know what I mean? Like, at least that's what their birth certificate for the Little League World Series says.
Right.
I don't believe it.
They're actually 10.
They're really, I'm 12. No, but so that you can prospect it. That's just a different type of gambling. And it's funny how the episode has gotten this way because we're trying to make it an asset class. We're trying to make this thing. We're trying to make it like something else. Think of the stock market, right? If you want to be a blue chip investor, Andrew will call you a fat cat buying mantles and not doing anything, sitting on a throne. You can buy Coke. You can do what Warren Buffett does. You can buy these stocks that pay you dividends and just, they're never going to rock your world. They're never going to quadruple in a month, right? But there's pink sheets. There's penny stocks. There are high risk, high reward investments that could go to zero, right? There's over-the-counter markets. There's earnings tradings, which is similar to buying a card right before somebody plays in a game. You know what I mean? You can buy the stock before earnings comes out. It's the same stuff, man. It's just gambling.
I like what P. Ryan said about this in that there's still more store of value than investments. I saw that comment and I've been kind of running it through the Goldberg filter. And I think there's a little more accuracy because I've been talking about dividends. These cards need to pay dividends. You're like, how are they going to pay dividends? Like 3 cards you're going to put in. So I'm starting to see less investment, more store of value. I see that logic.
I can see that. Yeah, I can see that. Dude, I don't know if you saw, this was probably a year ago, man. I should repost this, but I found an old price guide from 1978. This was before Beckett was even a thing. I think it was just called like baseball cards. That was literally the name of the magazine, was baseball cards. And in it, I found an article about prospecting. I think it was called Prospecting. And the guy gave his picks of his picks were like, Pete Rose and like, and then guys you've never heard of. And he's like, I recommend that you buy, if you have the ability, buy $41 cards of this guy in hopes of it going up to $3. So it was a totally different game, back then.
Now we get skewered for that. People, Jeff Wilson and Cardboard Chronicles got lit up because they used to sell their picks.
Yeah, but that's what dealers were doing, man, back then. And dealers are, they're their own kind of, I guess they're their own demographic.
But when do you not do it? As long as you're disclosing what you're doing on this. I mean, they're in the stock market, people give plays. But you mentioned Jim Cramer early in the episode in a different kind of segment about doom and gloom about crypto and all the other stuff, right? But I mean, he's giving plays. That's first of all, that's entertaining. Second of all, you take it with a grain of salt. Third of all, they always have to say, "Hey, I'm long Disney, but guess what? I own a long position in Disney. I own this, so understand. I'm saying I like it. I also have a position, so take that into account." You do that with sports betting. You know what I mean? You do it with almost everything, right? Like, hey, I have a position in this one. You know what I mean? It's the same kind of stuff.
Cage, I'll give you an example, man. So do you guys remember when I released the video about the Star 101 MJ?
It's getting good.
Dude, so when I made that, I had already owned one, which wasn't for sale. It was a BGS 7.5. I made it. I looked back, I pumped this card to myself, man. So I made the video, and I was so pumped up by my own video that I went and I bought 3 other Star MJ. So I had 4 of them.
In which grade?
I had a 6.5, and then I had 2 7s, and then my original 7.5.
All BGS.
All BG, yeah, prior to PSA. So dude, I'm noticing though that when that video comes out, people start buying that card, and the price was actually going, and this was in the midst of kind of the that craziness of the market and everything. So that price is going up, and I'm buying as it's going up. As it's going up, I buy at the peak, and then dude, those cards I didn't sell any of them. Those cards all 3 months later all just crashed, and I lost 40% probably on those 3 at least. And then they kind of came back up a little bit and stuff, but I think what Patrick Ryan has said is, if you're you're highlighting a card and it has that hypishness to it, you shouldn't be listing one and selling one at the same time. I do think that's not a good road to go down. But I'm not against telling people why you put your money into something. Like, that's not pumping something to me. Like, if you go out and you're a big Kobe fan, and you buy a big Kobe card, and then you want to talk about it, like, that's the enjoyment of the hobby. I mean, if you can't talk about the card, that's not pumping something. Like, and the thing is, when you buy a card, you don't have to sign a contract that you're never going to sell that thing, because you don't know what life holds. You don't know if you're going to need funds. You don't know if, a different card is going to come along that you would rather have. So for us to say, like, as soon as I spend $1 on whatever this card is, or 1,000 or 10,000, for me to say this, okay, since I bought it now, I got to take it to my grave, no matter what comes along. Like, it's got to, or I'm not a collector, because
that's it. I was just gonna say, you're clearly not a collector. You have been shunned.
Right.
But I mean, but your point is valid, right? And people should hear this, right? Even me, I should hear it. My Grail chase. It's so funny. Somebody just did some content about what's your Grail at a show, and tell us what your Grail card is. And I love hobby influencers. I love them. It's like, hey, what's your Grail card? And instead of saying like, oh, I would love to get a Mantle rookie, or hey, I'd love to get one of the Tom Brady, rookie contenders out of 100, like what a Grail is, each and every one of the people that was interviewed went on their table and said, here's my Grail. It's a PSA 5, Johnny Dickhead, and you can buy it right now for $37 and a bag of chips. And it's like, dude, that wasn't the assignment. Like, what are you talking about? Like, you're not trying to shill your stuff here. That was anyway. So sometimes the hobby makes me laugh, but your point is really valid, right? It's like the Jordan, not the Star. I had a Star, But the 86 Fleer was my Grail card, and I bought it, and I bought it not cheap, but I bought it at a good price. I caught it on the run up. And
SGC 10 Jordan Fleer. Congratulations.
I'm gonna buy one of those. I'm gonna buy an SGC 10 eventually. But I bought that PSA 10, and
Probably will look nicer than yours.
And so many times people came and they said, "Hey, you know what? I need to, sell it. Here, I'm making an offer." And I'm like, "No, I'm not. I'm a collector. That's my Grail card. That's the card I always wanted to have, and now I consider myself a real collector because I have one. I have it." I tell Andrew, think about it. I don't know if you went to college and you're in a fraternity and, you play drinking games like Asshole was a fun little drinking game. And, you played it with enough people. You had enough tables. We played a game, Grand Asshole, where, there was a bunch of tables. You get, 30, 40 people together. And, the one table was, the dais at your bar mitzvah, Andrew, right? That was, the main table of all the champs, the champion table, like in poker.
It's a card game.
I got
that table. Game. You can't get to that table in the hobby unless you have one of those Jordan Fleers. I say this to Andrew. I'm like, this is the door opener. This is the you
Cage,
can get.
Let me ask you something, Cage.
I should have sold the fucking thing. Go ahead.
Cage, have you ever met Gary V?
Of course.
If you and Gary V, you guys are together, how does a conversation work between you two? I mean, I'm just being.
It doesn't really. I mean, he's a nice guy, but I don't like blueberries at all. That's part of the problem.
In talking about flippers, though, Kate, I think here's the thing that I don't understand. You and I and Andrew actually love cards. And so when you're flipping a card that you bought for that purpose, mm-hmm. I think that's whatever it is. But I come back to when I get cards, I just actually genuinely love them. So I don't understand when guys can just fully emotionally be detached from cards and buy them and flip them. Obviously, if I want something, it's going to be the main reason I buy it is because I connect with that player, that card, even if I end up selling it down the road. So that is on the flipping side of things where I'm not at all against flipping. I don't understand guys that are in it that don't like cards, don't find interest in it, don't think they're cool, don't enjoy it.
It's funny, Sean. What you're saying is 100% right? People will tell you after the fact at the exit, you have to be emotionally detached from the card. This is just a monetary transaction. Sell it because it's worth X, and you have to sell it. Don't get emotionally attached. But what you're saying and what we haven't actually added on to that is there's something wrong with those people who are trying to convince you of that because you wouldn't have had an entrance into that card if you didn't have some emotional attachment. I wouldn't have bought the Jordan to sell it if it wasn't wow, that's a card I need to get.
If you didn't sell all of your Klay Thompson 2012 PSA 10s to Gary.
Yeah.
And here's another thing that doesn't
Gary's supplier, Sean.
Here's something
I sold a lot
instead of Coke.
I did sell.
I would donate a PSA 5 just to see Cage and Gary in a room together just for a minute and just to see what goes down.
We had him on for an episode, our second time on, and it became so chaotic. Cage had to drop off of the podcast. He had to leave the
That's
show.
What happens. To let Gary talk.
I gotta go. I
had to leave for 10 minutes. Gary, just so you can get some words in. I'm going to leave for 10 minutes. I'll come right back. That's
awesome. That's awesome, man. Yeah, I don't understand. But here's one thing that doesn't get talked about a lot is buying that it's okay to buy a card and you may get tired of that thing. There are certain cards that I'll buy and at the time, maybe it's late at night and you can go into some rabbit holes late at night searching stuff, man. You start off looking for Jackie Robinson and you're buying Jackie Gleason postcards. I mean, it ends up just being a crazy deal. But that's another thing is buying cards and then you've got them for a while and you're just they lose their luster. And some cards don't do that, but then there are those other ones. And so there should be an understanding that you're not less of a collector because you've experienced a lot of different cards and they didn't do it for you. And so it's time to move on. Or what's that?
And we'll go to Shay in a second. I lose that luster the moment I open them out of their packages. So I buy all my cards digitally. So Peter, we
Yeah, but Andrew, before we go to Shy Way, it's okay for you to do that. Think of what Sean just talked about when he was a kid, because you're a kid. It's the late 80s and early 90s for you, because we went through this, you didn't. And what we had to do at the time when we got tired of our collection was you moved it into a top loader. You moved it into a binder. Your collection got stale and you moved it or you traded it. So when you open your pack of cards up, that's what you're doing. You're like, oh shit, I bought this, but you know what? I don't know why I bought this. I'm moving on to another thesis, right? So it's
And
okay.
you knew that if you bought a card, like the only way out of it was taking it to a card shop, and the most you're going to get is 50% of book value.
50
The
cents.
book.
That's
Yeah.
it. 50 cents on the dollar. That was the standard LCS line. Give me the Beckett, I'll give you 50 cents.
The high for me is finding a good deal. Like I bought a Manning Mosaic white sparkle for $100. It just ended wrong. Someone spelled Peyton Manning's first name with an A instead of an E. By the way, little fun tip: if you guys want deals, great way to do that. Cage's advice.
Spell the names wrong. Yeah, I've done that.
Spelled a Payton. So it went at $100 for white sparkle Mosaic PSA 10 Manning in his Colts jersey. I sold that two days later. As soon as it arrived, someone was like, "Yo, this is sick. I'll give you $350 for it." So done, easy. Move next.
Yeah, and that's when you actually have to connect real life logic and kind of cut the emotional side. So there's times where that's another thing that I like. What P. Ryan will say is if a card rises in value to a place where I wouldn't buy it today, then it's probably time to sell it. There have been a lot of times where I've had a Grail card that I love and the value goes up, and I'm like, if it were today, I don't know if I should hold on, if I would want to spend the money on it. So I sell it, and then there's times where 3, 4, 5 months later, you can buy it back lower. Now, in the last couple of years, that's been tougher to do, but we're kind of seeing some of that could be happening again here soon.
That's a great thing. What were you going to say about Shea?
So Shea, man, he's
Look
actually
at that. Guys, that's right there. Anything you think about this man and his crazy story post, he is hilarious because as soon as you said his name, Sean, you smiled. Because
I love
this
guy's
hilarious.
Yeah. I love the guy. Him and I, we were talking, I feel like a couple years ago, and we've met a few times, and yeah, he's a wild guy, but he also has like a really chill side too. But he's actually the first person that he's who introduced me to your guys' podcast. And he would always say on his little videos, he'd go, "Luka Takabran." And I was like, what did he say? He's like, Luka Takabran. And I'm like, what is a Luka Takabran? A Luka Takabran. And so I'm like, I was like, who's Luka Takabran? So I thought this was like, I didn't know if it was a foreign guy, like a foreign investor that he was working with or something. So then I asked him one day, I was like, man, you're always referring to Luka Takabran. Who is that? And he's like, it's a podcast. But he was, he always held you guys in such a, like you guys were the industry standard for what you were gauging the market. You were, so he would early on, he was always referring back to kind of, that was like me referring to a Beckett. He would refer to look at Takabran. Look at Takabran.
Listen, we had him on before he became, the face of the hobby, before he became the Warren Buffett of cards. But it's funny, he does say that, even because we've had him on a bunch of times. He always says, you guys were one of the first ones to put me on, you're the first ones to kind of, like put me out there. And you're not the first person who has said, hey, I found you guys from Shayway Vlogs.
Yeah,
right.
I do.
Believe it or not, my first time I met Jeff, sports card investor, right? It was Jeff Wilson. Jeff. First time I met Jeff at the National, he came up to me. He's like, "Oh yeah, Lucas Tigers and Browns. I watched the Shyway Vlogs episode." I was like, "Oh, that's
now you use him in all of your memes."
But if he's gonna make faces like he makes, I when he posts those weird, I screenshot them and save them for later dates. I have now an entire file folder of Jeff Wilson reaction images that I can add into my videos. I
It's
have
like
one
a
for
vault.
everything.
It's like the
Octane,
PWCC vault of Jeff Wilson memes.
literally, Lameme and then Octane have inspired Cage to turn Cage Lawyer from
Into a meme.
a hobby voice that people listen to a meme.
Once
From
a
a
week.
trusted-
Once a week, I try to
From
do
a
a meme.
trusted voice to a meme.
The most
trustworthy
recent
meme.
one's a little off-brand for me.
Cage-
It's a little R-rated.
I don't know if I've listened to when you've shared, but so is your last name Lawyer or are you a lawyer?
Yes, so my first name is Cage. My last name is Lawyer. I am not a lawyer, but I did sleep in a Holiday Inn Express last night. So if you put me in a courtroom, I would probably be okay.
Gotcha. Okay.
So
I never
guys,
knew.
So I send out calendar invites, right? You too, Brian Gray. I send out calendar invites to everyone, and I add 2 of Cage's emails, both of them. His AOL and his Gmail one. So
that's how people find out my name. You could find out my actual name if you're on the show. And still
I think
people
96% of even the people we've had on the show still think it's Cage Lawyer.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, from a distance, you think he's a lawyer, and you think he really kind of just identifies with his occupation.
I am a lawyer.
Out of the womb,
and,
they renamed him Cage Lawyer.
I got out of law school and started practicing in 2001. So I have been a practicing lawyer for over 20 years now.
Sean, September 10th, 2001, the day before.
That was my first day of work as a lawyer, September 10th.
In New York City.
Wow.
Downtown.
Ground Zero.
Downtown Manhattan.
Wow.
Maiden and Broadway. Yeah.
What we've tried to do with the show, and it's taken on a life of its own, and sponsors and people that support us and our audience. But I come from an immigrant family where we would have conversations around the dinner table to kind of get to the truth, right? We were always seeking truth. I don't know why. Pravda in Russian. I say that word to Cage.
Pravda. Every time you sneeze.
Not everything is always rosy, but not everything is always terrible. There's this middle ground, this middle area where if you're able to kind of sit with people around the round table and discuss, you're able to get to that truth or try to find the truth. And that's what we wanted to do with our show is oftentimes and Cage and I do it ourselves. Like yesterday we did it through text. I'm selling a lot more on Whatnot. I love what SGC is doing. I think their turnaround times are incredible. They grade accurately, and their prices are fair. Cage has been in the hobby longer, and he's like, PSA, it holds that premium, that 10. That's what people are looking for. And we have that discourse. And I think the truth in reality, Cage, is somewhere in between what both of us are saying.
What I would say here is we'll do a whole episode on this, but the statement of this company grades more accurately is something that we can spend an hour on for our listeners. Because I think that is a fun sentence, because what is accurate in a subjective grading environment where there is not a universal set of rules? It's like saying, there's a reason why baseball is a little weird, because it's not on a uniform court. It's not on the same size field. Football is played, all the teams play on the same field, right? There's a reason why people will say that's a Yankee Stadium home run, right?
Redstones move all the time too, and then they'll go robot pitchers. I'm curious what you guys think is going to happen. I was on that same note, there's a few grading companies that have popped up just after national, right? Like AGS and Tag, and then there's this hybrid grading. And how is that going to work? Like you said, if there are no agreed upon standards for grading, how can a computer?
Well, I'll talk from the vintage baseball. Kind of has always been my first love. I have a lot of different cards, and I love newer basketball stuff. But when I look at vintage, and when I think of how PSA grades versus SGC, we'll just talk about those two in specific. What I've noticed is SGC on vintage cards, there's more leeway for certain areas where with PSA, it almost seems like they could potentially get a little more dogmatic on some things. So in SGC, it's almost like here's been my experience, at least in the past. I'm not speaking for current modern the grading right now. SGC, you'll get a card where the card itself may look really, really gorgeous, but then on the back, it'll have a little wrinkle that PSA won't even look at the rest of the card, just because it has that little wrinkle on the back, it won't allow, they won't allow it to go over a PSA 2. And so where SGC has a flexibility where they're like, yeah, it has that little wrinkle on the back, but on the front, it's got gorgeous centering and gorgeous coloring. But so the technicality that I see, you know, like in a PSA, you know, won't allow it to get that higher grade. And I've seen that for years and years with vintage. That being said, I almost
with that too, real quick. I think PSA is a little more lenient. Actually, I don't think their website says they are more lenient on centering.
This is what I'm saying. That's why you can't say what's an accurate grade, because everybody has their own grading rules.
Yes.
Consistency.
Consistency.
You could talk about grading consistency, sure, but accuracy, you have to talk about accuracy within their own stated guidelines. You know what I mean? So that's, I think you're 100% right, Andrew. And you know what? It works both ways. I mean, SGC probably, if they were here, would tell you. I got into this a little bit with Derek from Heritage on our episode with the National Treasures Day. We talk about the mantle, but like, you know, PSA, the example I used was a Ty Cobb T206. So PSA will look at, you know, the coloring, the centering, the whole 9 yards, and if it all looks good, they'll give it a grade. Whereas SGC, just like you're talking about the overall eye appeal sort of the card, they look at, like, you know, some of the Cobb ones, the eyes are out of focus, and like the ink is actually put kind of like a little offset on the eye, and it looks kind of like, you know, the eyes are all bugging out. There are caramel cards of a lot of players, Ty Cobb, you name it. Joe Jackson has one where the red on the lip is almost like a red lipstick that they put on. It's sort of like the ink on the card, and it's kind of like over here, you know, or over here. Now that's not an off-centered card. That's not a corner problem. It's not a surface problem. It's just that's the way that some of the cards were made. I'm telling you, Andrew, look it up on eBay. You'll find them. These caramel cards. You'll see the Ty Cobb ones. I can show you an example one. SGC looks at that also.
But I can get a refractor of Mahomes. Why would I?
SGC looks at those, and SGC will actually grade lower because that does it. Like you're saying, you're talking about the eye appeal of the card, and sometimes the SGC grade will be better because it's not as dogmatic. Sometimes SGC, that actually will make SGC grade, I would say, a little tougher, if we're going to use words like that, on cards where they look at that eye appeal of the card and said, oh, you know what, that kind of detracts from the eye appeal, whereas the dogmatic rules of PSA, they're not even looking at those things. So, I mean, by the way, Andrew, what you're hearing here in vintage is it's almost the same as what you're doing with the crack and sub on, you know, grading stuff, because this difference in grading has existed in cards for, you know, for as long as the cards are out there, right? You can find a card like we're talking about where, you know, a 52 mantle just graded by PSA, it's a 6 number. Somebody sent me a picture of it today, side by side, 1 and 1, and they were both PSA 1s, and 1-1 looked like it got run over by a marching band and Naked Gun too. Thank you, Sean.
Right.
You know, and the other one.
Did that quote make it in this?
No, but I'm using it. That's
okay.
There you go. It's from the pre-show, from back in the green room. So and then there's a one right next to it. It's a centered one, but I'll bet it has a wrinkle on the back of it. I'll bet it has like a surface problem, some sort of a card issue on the back, and it became a PSA 1. You look at these two cards side by side, and it is. I mean, everyone, even the blind, are going to take the PSA 1 that is the nicer looking one. You know? So I mean,
there's this art vault in I think it's Geneva. It's called Freeport, where people actually do the same thing with art. So they'll buy it at an auction house here, have it sent there, reappraised based on eye appeal, and
that's called tax fraud, though.
I'm just trying to parallel for other industries, you dickhead.
Yeah, I get you.
Last question, we'll have to let you go. If I was a genie, Aladdin, and I could grant one wish, and it could be like, what could we change? What could we add? What could we improve about the hobby, Sean? What would it be? Minus more musicians in the hobby, because that's already happening. You, Peter Pac-Man, take the throne. There's going to be more. What's one thing you would add, subtract, change?
That's a big question, man. I don't know. I think the hobby is we are so easily distracted week by week, and so I think, man, like growing into maturity as collectors and whatever you want to call yourself, investor, flipper, collector, dealer, growing into a greater, you know, level of kind of hobby maturity to where you're not kind of tossed to and fro by this influencer, what this guy is, talking about, what's cool, all of a sudden this card gets, busted out of a pack, and now this is what everybody's talking about. Because these cycles, man, they only last for like 24 hours, 48 hours, like, and then we're on to something else. So I think for the hobby to continue to thrive long term, there's got to be that maturity to where you're not as affected by hobby news. Obviously, there's a lot of this hobby news is great. I mean, it's what keeps it new and exciting, and I do think that's one of the main reasons why the hobby is going to continue to flourish. All this social media activity, so many different channels and podcasts, and this stuff is not going away anytime soon. So I'm very excited about the future of the hobby. I just think, man, like, people need to learn how to kind of navigate collecting and sports cards on their own through their own research, and kind of, understand who you are within the hobby, what your interests are, what and don't allow yourself to be, kind of convinced by what someone else says you're supposed to be. And so I think that's one reason why, you can take. I had a pastor back in the day that would say, chew the meat and spit out the bones. And I think that applies a lot to kind of the hobby. Like, there's certain things where I look at this influencer and I'm like, I don't agree with everything this guy says, but he was right on right there. And so I can take that, and he may not totally be down with, someone else's style. I can take that guy's style and take, Cardboard Chronicles. None of us have the full understanding of, like, everything, So I can take a guy like Josh at Cardboard Chronicles and say, man, this is really cool what he said there. But not necessarily be a full out basketball guy. And then I look over at, you guys and stuff that you're talking about and highlighting. And then I'm creating my own understanding of who I am in this space and why I'm in it. Versus, you see a lot of the younger people that are coming in, and they're so easily influenced week by week and week by week, that it's like, man, you're just literally going to be following the Pied Piper until you understand, kind of like on your own, a little bit more, go a little deeper, learn a little bit more about cards, why you're doing what you're doing, why you're buying what you're buying, why you're trading what you're trading, versus just being reactionary whenever somebody blows the trumpet and says, now Mac Jones is on fire, so throw your money into Mac Jones. So yeah, I think, and that's one.
Do you think
one
that
reason.
applies, Cage? I'll give it to both sides of the equation, because that's a great point. Like, chew the meat, spit out the bones. I feel like that applies to like buy, or like, this is what's happening in the market, versus it also happens on like, this is a scam or a hanky panky that's going on, and that crowd also rushes there without trying to understand the meat versus the bones of, right?
Yeah, like, puts people on public display and attacking people before it's like yeah, man, that there's that aspect too. And I think, yeah, I'm not into cancel culture. So a guy may, he may mess up, and if he comes back and he's like, I messed up, man, like, I'm not going to just, completely. Now, if some guy's running a scam, and he's just going on with it, like, he needs to get called out. But if somebody says something wrong or does something wrong, like, to me, man, there needs to be some grace. Like, we don't need to just put this guy on public crucifixion, and so I hear what you're saying there, man.
Cage, thoughts, lawyer, Mr. Lawyer?
We got a lot of good stuff in here, right? And I think the best thing that we heard here from the hobby genie and his sidekick are, you can take your lessons from a lot of different people, and there's no right or wrong way to do it. I mean, we quoted P. Ryan like 4 times in this episode, but I don't think any of us are buying tickets. You know what I mean? So, get your info. Same thing. Josh, Cardboard Chronicles. Sometimes his stories are amazing. Doesn't mean you have to only buy Chris Paul cards, right? I like that there's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of different ways to do this, but the important undertone there is I'm in this for a long time, still talking about my coffin card is going to be my '89 Fleer Billy Ripken. Right, you mentioned an '89 score Barry Sanders, and your vintage baseball collecting and how you played baseball. You came home and you watched baseball and the whole deal. I think in addition to the news cycle, in addition to doing your research, as they say, buy what you love, not what influencers are telling you to buy. I think one of the important things to remember to keep people in the hobby, sustainable is, we're tying it through here like a Seinfeld episode. There has to be some emotional connection, right?
Yeah.
And you're going to get less of that if you're just buying something because somebody told you that that's what they're buying.
Yeah.
Following the herd, you might be a football fan, but if you're a fan of, the Saints, maybe it's time to invest a little bit in Jameis Winston for pennies on the dollar instead of Mac Jones, because that's where everyone's going. I'm just using that as an example.
After they cut Ian,
They cut Ian.
My loyalty is with the lawyer family. Ian lawyer, Cage lawyer.
Listen, it's going to be cheaper to get his
Leah
cards for
lawyer.
us now. That's all. I wasn't buying the Ian book because I thought it was going to be a lot of money. I was buying Ian book because he had a cool name.
So I'm listening to Stacking Slabs the other day, and one of the dudes on, I don't remember what his name was, but he said one of the reasons I stopped playing fantasy football was because I didn't want to care about people I didn't want to care about. And so and then, you tie that together with sports cards, and it's like, why the heck am I buying Joe Burrow when I hate the Bengals? Like, why am I buying, Justin Herbert when I want him to lose when he plays Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs? So there is that measure where obviously if you're flipping, but if you're a collector, it's just much more fun if you love Jackie Robinson and what he stood for, to buy his cards. Same with me and Patrick Mahomes. I'm a lifelong Chiefs fan, and I love the quarterback. And so when I buy his stuff, I connect with it. That doesn't mean that every single Mahomes card I buy, I'm going to keep forever, but some of them I'm going to try to keep as long as I can. So
we're going to absolutely do round 2. Victory Investments. Make sure to follow him. It's a must follow. It's not even a question. I think you guys will enjoy his content. Sean, I appreciate you coming on the show. Cage, it's good to have you back, man. I'm really excited. I'm really excited for what we're going to do the rest of the year here and in the future. Luka Nation, we love you.
Thank you, guys. Thanks, Cage.
Thank you all for listening to another episode of Lucas, Tigers, and Bronzo My. I wanted to tell you about a new service that we have starting as of today, and I'm really, really excited to bring it to you guys. So as a part of our partnership with SGC, we got 50 free submissions every single month. And many of you have taken advantage of that. And it's amazing that we could have the opportunity to 650 episodes, 675 episodes in, to go ahead and give back to our community. As people were sending those cards in, they asked, can we send 5, 10, 20 more cards to you guys? We'll pay for it, but we wanted them graded with SGC. You guys know SGC is turning cards around in 13 to 14 business days, have incredible customer service, and their secondary market values are going up day after day after day. And that's exciting for the hobby and exciting for the grading landscape. So we didn't want to just rush into it. We wanted to do it right. And what we did was I relocated here to Boca Raton, Florida. I opened up a P.O. box maybe 5 minutes away from SGC, and I will be hand delivering and hand picking up the cards. So you don't have to worry about anyone else touching your cards. It will be me, and I will update you every step of the way. So here's how it's going to work. I'm going to personally pick up the cards from a P.O. box, prep them, new card saver, new penny sleeve, and deliver them to SGC every single Tuesday. Why Tuesday? Well, it lets the stragglers over the weekend come back through on Monday and gives me a day to prep, and it basically gives SGC the entire week to work on grading those cards. Once your cards pop, only then at the end of the process will you be paying for the service. It's $25 per card, simple as that, and the turnaround times have never been faster. We're hearing right now 13, 14, less than 20 business days. So there it is, 9170 Glades Road, number 135. Is the P.O. Box in Boca Raton, Florida. 33434. 9170 Glades Road, number 135, Boca Raton, Florida 33434. Of course, you could shoot me an email or shoot me a text anytime, and I'm always available. Many of you already have my email. It's iamandrewgoldberg@gmail.com, or my cell phone number 215-519-9154. Reach out with any questions. I could walk you through the process. I've hopped on the call with quite a few of you, and I'm happy to do that. Love you, Luka Nation.